When was the last time you ate?
2 days ago.
The girl whispered, trembling, barely standing. 6 men on motorcycles stood behind her. 6 motorcycles stalled in the rain. Benjamin Foster, 64 years old, $11 in his pocket. 30 days until he lost everything.
Come in, everyone.
How much will it cost?
I'll take care of it.
He wrapped his only blanket around the girl's shoulders, opened his worn-out repair kit, crawled under the first motorcycle.
Sir, come to sleep.
I'll sleep when I'm done.
8 hours, 6 engines. One by one, he got them running again, with trembling hands and a back that begged him to stop. He fixed 6 that night, asked for nothing. He didn't know one of them would fix his entire life. That morning, 12 hours before the rain, before the motorcycles, before any of it, Benjamin Foster sat at his kitchen table and opened his banking app. $11.42. He stared at the number for a moment, then closed the phone and set it face down on the table. Across from him, Naomi, his granddaughter, 19, taking online college classes between shifts at the shop, poured the last of the store brand cereal into her bowl. She shook the box twice to get the dust out. Ben slid his toast onto her plate. Quiet, like he'd been doing it for years. "Grandpa, I saw that." "Saw what?" "You need to eat." "I ate." "You had coffee. That's not food." "Coffee's food enough." She gave him that look, the same one her mother used to give him, but she didn't push it. In this house, you didn't argue about things that wouldn't change. Ben grabbed his keys and drove to the shop. The pickup was older than Naomi, a '98 Chevy that coughed every morning like it was thinking about quitting. But it ran. Because Ben made things run. That's what he did. 4 minutes through a neighborhood that used to have a barber, a laundromat, a corner store with a hand-painted sign. Now half the block was boarded up. 3 buildings wore the same sign. Sold, Dawson Holdings. Ben didn't know who Dawson Holdings was, not yet, but he would. He unlocked Foster's Fix-It. The sign was 43 years old, painted by his father, Willie Foster, in 1983, the year he opened the shop with $800 and a borrowed set of wrenches. Willie's photo still hung on the wall. A young black man in coveralls, grinning wide, holding a torque wrench like a trophy. Below the photo, Willie's toolbox, leather-wrapped, worn smooth by 2 generations of hands. Ben touched it every morning. Didn't say a word, just rested his fingers on the leather for a second. A prayer without sound. 1 customer all day. Brake pads on a 10-year-old Camry, $85. He split the money before the engine cooled, $40 for groceries, $45 toward the electric bill. Naomi needed textbooks for her classes. That would have to wait. Again. At 2 o'clock, the mail came. A letter from the county assessor's office, Sandra Wells, Property Tax Division. $14,200. Back taxes. Due in full. 30 days. Failure to pay. Public auction of 412 Elm Street. Ben read it twice. Folded it slow. Slipped it into his shirt pocket, face down. Like a man putting away a diagnosis he wasn't ready to say out loud. He didn't tell Naomi. Picked up a wrench, went right back to work. 9 o'clock. Rain starting. Ben was locking the bay doors when headlights swung across the lot. 6 motorcycles, rumbling rough, running ugly, pulled in one after another. A man stepped off the lead bike, mid-50s, gray beard, leather vest, a patch that read, "Iron Roads, Veterans Riding Club." Dale Cooper. Handshake like a man who'd carried heavy things for a long time. Sir, we've got 6 bikes running rough and 100 miles to Richmond. You the mechanic? Ben looked at the bikes, looked at the rain picking up, looked at Dale's face, lined, tired, a man who didn't ask for help unless there was no other way. Pull him in. Dale reached for his wallet. What's this gonna run us? Let me look at him first. He had no intention of charging them. We know that. They didn't. 9:30. Ben walked slow around all 6 bikes. He didn't plug in a diagnostic machine. Didn't need one. He listened. Tilted his head toward each engine like a doctor with a stethoscope. Tapped the cylinder heads with the back of a wrench. Sniffed the fuel lines. 43 years. That was his machine. He grabbed a piece of cardboard and wrote, 6 bikes, 6 problems. Bikes 1 and 2, dead spark plugs, quick. Bike 3, leaking fuel line. Bike 4, clogged carburetor. Bike 5, shorted electrical wiring. Bike 6, Dale's Harley, cracked manifold gasket. The hardest one. 3 hours minimum. He started with bike 1, pulled the old plugs, reached into his parts shelf and grabbed his last set of spark plugs, the ones he'd been saving for a paying customer. He didn't hesitate. Not for a second. 15 minutes. The engine roared back to life. Clean. Smooth. Tommy Garrett, 28, former Army mechanic, watched from a stool with his mouth half open. Damn. Dale looked over. What? He's faster than half my unit. But Ben didn't hear any of it. He was already under bike 2. 10:30. Bike 2. Another dead spark plug. Ben swapped it in 8 minutes flat, using the last plug from the set. The parts shelf behind him was empty now. 43 years of keeping it stocked, and tonight he'd given it all away to strangers. Tommy pulled out his phone, started recording. Not for clout, he just couldn't believe what he was watching. A 64-year-old man moving with more precision than anyone Tommy had served with. Bike 3, fuel line leak. Then crawled out and checked his inventory. Nothing. No replacement line in stock. He stood there a moment, thinking. Then walked to the back of the shop where the utility sink sat against the wall, studied the water line running beneath it. Pulled a hacksaw from the drawer, cut a 6-inch section of his own pipe, bent it, fitted it, sealed it tight. The fuel line held. Tommy stopped recording, looked at Dale. Dale just shook his head. 11:30. That's when Ben noticed the girl. She'd been in the corner of the garage the whole time, knees pulled to her chest, rocking slightly. But now she was coughing, deep, wet, the kind that comes from weeks without medicine or a warm bed. Ben stopped working, looked at her, really looked. She wasn't just wet from the rain, she was wrecked. Clothes torn at the shoulder, a fading bruise on her wrist. Thin, not the kind you choose. The kind that happens when you haven't had a real meal in longer than you want to admit. He didn't ask questions, just went to the back room. Came back with 3 things. The wool blanket from his cot, the only one he had. A packet of instant noodles, the last food in the shop. And a cup of coffee, the last he could make. He draped the blanket over her shoulders, set the noodles and coffee in her hands. Didn't say a word. Turned around and crawled back under bike 4. She looked down at the food. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold this time. She cried. Quiet. Almost no sound at all. It was the first meal anyone had given her in 2 days. Dale saw it happen from across the room. He didn't say anything either. But something shifted behind his eyes. He was beginning to understand exactly who Benjamin Foster was. 1 in the morning. Bike 4, clogged carburetor. Ben pulled it apart piece by piece, soaked each component in cleaning solution, then scrubbed every jet and passage with an old toothbrush. Slow, patient. The kind of care most people don't give things that belong to them, let alone to a stranger's machine. Everyone else was asleep. Bikers stretched across chairs and leaning against walls. Just Ben and Ellie awake in the quiet. She started talking. Not because he asked, because she'd carried it too long. Left home at 19. Her father was wealthy, rich in the kind of way where someone else drives your car. He wanted her in his company. She wanted her own path. They fought, she walked out, he let her go. 3 years, not one phone call. She'd slept in shelters, on park benches, in gas station bathrooms. She'd been robbed twice, hospitalized once, malnutrition and exhaustion, and not a single person came to visit. Ben listened the whole time, hands working, eyes steady on the carburetor. He never interrupted, never judged. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Sounds like you both lost something you didn't have to lose. 3 a.m. Bike 5, shorted electrical wiring, the invisible kind of problem. Ben had to trace every wire by hand, find the break, strip it, reconnect. His fingers weren't cooperating anymore. The cold had stiffened every joint. He stopped, pressed his palms together, blew warm air across his knuckles, waited until the feeling came back, then went in again. He stepped outside for a minute, leaned against the wall. His back was locked tight. His knees ached deep, the kind of ache that lives in the bone. 6 straight hours on concrete will do that to a man half his age. At 64, it was something closer to punishment. He pulled the tax notice from his pocket and read it one more time under the security light. 30 days. $14,200. Today he made $85. Tonight he was giving away far more than that, and charging nothing for it. He folded the paper, looked up at the sky, rain on his face. Then he walked back inside, sat down on the cold floor, and picked up the wrench. 4 a.m. Bike 6, Dale's Harley, cracked manifold gasket. The hardest job of the night. Ben had been on it for 3 hours already, and now he was in the final stretch. His arms were heavy, his eyes burned, but his hands kept moving. Ellie sat beside him on an overturned bucket. Neither of them had slept. The coffee was long gone. They were down to tap water and paper cups. My old man used to say something, Ben said, not looking up from the engine. What's that? He said, if someone pulls up to your door broke down, you fix it. Don't ask what's in their wallet, ask what's wrong with the engine. Ellie stared into her cup. My dad would never say something like that. Ben was quiet for a moment. Then, slow and steady, maybe he just needs somebody to remind him. He set down the wrench, looked at her, straight on. Call your father. Whatever happened between you, he's still your daddy. Don't waste the time. Believe me. She didn't answer. But something moved behind her eyes. Something that had been locked for 3 years. 5:30. First light through the garage door, all 6 engines running. Ben stood up slow. His coveralls were soaked through. His body moved like it had aged 10 years in one night. But 6 motorcycles sat in a row, every one of them alive again. Dale reached into his vest, pulled out his wallet. Name your price. No price. Just finish your ride. Those vets are waiting on you. Dale looked at him for a long time. Then he gripped Ben's hand. Not a handshake, something more, and held it. He left his card on the workbench. You ever need anything at all, you call. Tommy slapped Ben's shoulder on the way out. You're the best wrench I've ever seen, sir. And I mean that. Ellie was last. She hugged him, gentle, careful, the way you hold someone you're afraid might break. "Thank you," she whispered. Then 6 engines roared, one after another, and pulled out of the lot into the gray morning. Ben stood in the doorway and watched until the taillights dissolved into fog. He walked back inside, sat down in his chair, rested his head against Willie's toolbox, closed his eyes. He'd given away everything. His last spark plugs, a piece of his own water line, his only blanket, his last packet of food, his last cup of coffee. 8 hours of labor on a body that was begging him to stop. Total amount received, 0. That afternoon, the bikers reached Richmond. Dale told the story at the rally to 200 riders. Tommy posted his video on the Iron Roads forum with 6 words. 64 years old, $0 charged. It spread through the biker community like a lit match in dry grass. That same night, in a shelter 40 miles away, Ellie Dawson sat on a thin mattress and pulled out a pen and a piece of paper. She hadn't written to her father in 3 years. She didn't ask for money. She just told him about an old man, a blanket, a bowl of noodles at midnight, and a sentence at 4 a.m. that she couldn't get out of her head. 4 days later, a black SUV pulled into the lot at Foster's Fix-It. Victor Crane stepped out, pressed suit, leather folder, a smile that had closed 100 deals. He placed an offer on Ben's workbench, $50,000 for the property. "Take the deal, Mr. Foster. The auction won't be as kind." Ben didn't pick up the paper. "My father built this shop. It's not for sale." Victor smiled. "Everything's for sale. Some people just haven't heard the right number." Ben dropped the offer and the business card into the trash can before Victor's SUV had cleared the lot. The next morning, Ben drove to the county assessor's office. He wore his clean shirt, the one he kept for Sundays and situations that required dignity. He carried the tax notice in his hand like a man carrying a question he already knew the answer to, but needed someone to say out loud. Sandra Wells sat behind a desk stacked with files, mid-50s, glasses on a chain, polite in the way people are polite when they've learned to separate their job from their conscience. "Mr. Foster, how can I help you?" "I want to understand this." He set the notice on her desk. $14,000. "My taxes were a third of that last year. What changed?" Sandra pulled up his file on her screen, scrolled through it slowly. Then she leaned back in her chair, the way someone does when they're about to deliver news they wish they didn't have to. "Your block was reclassified 6 months ago. Commercial preference. Commercial non-traditional zone. It triggered a commercial. A bombs out this problems that I have in advance gathering the public documents say. It's still some many problems of our designed that your almost have been fun. Your block was reclassified 6 months ago to be investment that's full property reassessment. Reclassified by who? A development company submitted the rezoning request to the county board. Once the zoning changes, the reassessment is automatic. It's not discretionary." Ben sat very still. "So a company asks you to reclassify my block. My taxes go up 3 times overnight, and when I can't pay, they come in and buy my land for nothing. Is that what you're telling me?" Sandra shifted in her chair, took her glasses off, put them back on. "I don't make the policy, Mr. Foster. I apply it." "And who made the policy?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. They both knew the answer was sitting in an office across town, with a leather folder and a corporate smile. Ben stood up, folded the notice back into his pocket, walked out without another word. Naomi was waiting in the truck. She saw his face the moment he opened the door. "How bad?" It's not just taxes. Somebody set this up, the whole block. They reclassified us so the taxes would jump, and when people can't pay, they come in and buy for pennies. Naomi's jaw tightened. She pulled out her phone. Then we fight. That same week, Dale Cooper called. He'd heard about the tax situation through the small-town grapevine. Someone at the rally knew someone who knew someone. That's how things move in tight communities. It doesn't take long for a story to find the people who need to hear it. They're doing what to you? Dale's voice was sharp enough to cut steel. After what you did for us? After that night? It's not connected, Dale. They don't know about that night. I don't care. This ain't right. And I don't sit still when things ain't right. Dale hung up and made 12 phone calls in 90 minutes. Regional chapter presidents, veteran advocacy contacts, old friends who owed him favors and new ones who didn't but would show up anyway. Every call started the same way. Let me tell you about a man I met. Tommy's video had already been circulating for days. The clip of Ben's hands moving under an engine at 2 a.m, steady and sure, while the rest of the world slept. It had been shared across Iron Road's forums, veteran Facebook groups, motorcycle communities from Virginia to Ohio. The story of the old mechanic who fixed 6 bikes for free was no longer just a story. It was becoming a symbol of something people thought they'd lost. Tommy set up a GoFundMe that night. In 48 hours, it raised $6,000. Meaningful, generous, but not enough. Not even close to 14,200. More importantly, the riders started digging. A retired civil rights attorney named Catherine Brooks, who rode with the D.C. chapter of Iron Roads on weekends and argued cases in federal court during the week, pulled the public records on Dawson Holdings. What she found made her go quiet for a full minute. The same playbook. 3 counties. 14 communities. Reclassify the zoning, inflate the taxes, wait for the owners to fall behind, then acquire the land at auction for a fraction of its value. Every time the same sequence, every time the people who lost their properties were the ones who could least afford to fight back. This isn't charity work, Catherine told Dale over the phone. This is a civil rights issue. And it goes far beyond one garage on Elm Street. Back at the shop, which was open again, busier than it had been in months, Naomi was on her own phone. She'd called the local TV station 3 times before a young reporter finally called back and agreed to come out. I don't want pity, Ben said when Naomi told him. Grandpa, you're not begging. You're telling the truth. There's a difference. He didn't agree right away. He sat with it for a whole hour, staring at Willie's photo on the wall, as if asking his father's permission. Then he nodded. Once. The interview was simple. Ben sat in his garage, coveralls on, toolbox at his feet. Willie's picture over his right shoulder. No makeup, no script, no spin. I'm not asking for a handout, he said. My daddy built this shop 43 years ago with $800 and a borrowed set of wrenches. I've been here ever since. I've fixed every car, every truck, every motorcycle that pulled up to this door. And I have never once turned somebody away because they couldn't pay. He paused, looked straight into the camera. I just want to keep my door open. The segment aired that Thursday evening. By Friday morning, it had been shared 400 times. By Saturday, people were driving 20 minutes past 3 chain auto shops just to bring their cars to Foster's Fix-It. They didn't come because they felt sorry for him. They came because they'd seen a man on television who meant every single word he said. And they wanted to give their money to someone like that. The register filled up. The appointment book filled up. Ben worked 14-hour days, not because he had to, but because for the first time in a long time, people were lined up at his door who believed in what he'd built. Naomi counted the books on Sunday night. Between the GoFundMe donations and the new business, they had $10,500 saved. She looked up from the numbers. "We're getting close, Grandpa." For a moment, just one quiet moment, it felt like they might actually make it. Ben let himself believe it. He shouldn't have. Because that same Thursday evening, while the interview was airing on the 6 o'clock news, Victor Crane was sitting in his living room watching. He set down his glass, picked up his phone. And he didn't call to congratulate anyone. He called the county fire marshal's office. "I'd like to file a safety concern," he said calmly. "A commercial property at 412 Elm Street. I believe their fire safety inspection certificate may have expired." He hung up, took another sip, and waited. For 1 week, things were good. The shop was full every day. Cars lined up before Ben even unlocked the door. He worked sunrise to sunset, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he didn't dread opening the register. There was money in it. Not a fortune, but enough to breathe. Naomi ran the front between her online classes, answering the phone, scheduling appointments, keeping the books in a spiral notebook she'd bought for $2. She was good at it, quick with numbers, patient with people. Ben watched her work and thought, she's going to be something bigger than this shop, something her mother would have been proud of. On Sunday, he did something he hadn't done in months. He went to the grocery store and bought real food. Fresh chicken, collard greens, sweet potatoes, a small bag of flour. That night, he stood in the kitchen and made Dorothy's Sunday dinner recipe. His late wife's roast chicken with gravy. The one she used to make when there was something to celebrate. He and Naomi sat at the table together, no phones, no worry, just food and quiet, and the feeling of something that might be turning around. He put $2,500 more toward the tax bill. Total saved? $13,000. $1,100 short. Naomi hung a new sign on the garage door that weekend, hand-painted in her careful, steady lettering. Foster's Fix-It. Honest work, fair price, since 1983. Ben looked at it for a long time, touched the corner of it with his fingertip. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. That night after Naomi went to bed, Ben sat alone in the dark garage beneath Willie's photo. "I think we're going to make it, Pop." He believed it. Across town, in an office that smelled like leather and new carpet, Victor Crane was on the phone with the county clerk. The fire marshal's inspection team had already red-tagged the property that afternoon. Now Victor was requesting one more thing. "I'd like to formally petition for an accelerated auction timeline. Given the open code violation, I believe the standard 30-day window can be reduced." It could. And it was. 30 days became 14. The eye of the storm was closing. The fire inspector showed up on a Tuesday morning. No warning, no phone call. Just a white county truck pulling into the lot, and a man in a clipboard vest stepping out with the kind of expression that said, this wasn't going to be a conversation. He walked through the garage slowly, checked the exits, checked the extinguishers, checked the electrical panel. Then he pulled a red tag from his folder and taped it to the front door. "Your fire safety certification expired 11 months ago, Mr. Foster. I'm required to suspend operations until a new inspection is completed and passed." "How long?" 3 to 4 weeks. There's a backlog." "And the cost?" $1,800. Ben stood in the doorway and watched the man drive away. The red tag fluttered in the wind like a flag someone had planted on conquered land. He knew who did this. He drove to the Dawson Holdings field office on the other side of town, walked past the receptionist without stopping, found Victor Crane sitting behind a glass desk in a corner office with a view of the river. Victor didn't look surprised. He looked like a man who had been expecting this visit. "Mr. Foster, what can I do for you? You filed that complaint. I reported a concern. It's a public safety matter. I'm sure you understand. You've been inside my shop. You know it's safe. Victor leaned forward, folded his hands. What I know and what the paperwork says are two different things. That's how the system works, Mr. Foster. You play by the rules, or the rules play you. Ben didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His voice was low and steady, the way it always was when he meant every word. My father built those walls 43 years ago, with his own hands. My wife hung the curtains in that window the year we got married. My granddaughter did her homework on that workbench every night for 10 years. That shop is not a number on your spreadsheet. That shop is a life. Victor sat back, adjusted his cuffs. Take the 50,000, Mr. Foster. Walk away with something. Because if this goes to auction, you won't walk away with anything at all. Ben looked at him, long and steady. Then he turned and walked out without a word. Behind him, Victor picked up the phone. Move the auction timeline up. I want it finalized within 2 weeks. The official notice arrived 3 days later. Ben opened it at the kitchen table. The auction had been moved up 14 days. The amount owed, $14,200 in back taxes, plus $1,800 for the inspection fee. Total, $16,000. He had $13,000. The red tag meant the shop was closed. No customers, no income. Every day that passed, the gap got wider, not smaller. The GoFundMe had stalled at $8,500, and after the processing fees, it was closer to $8,000. People had been generous, but generosity has a ceiling, and the internet moves on fast. Naomi came home that evening from the library where she'd been doing her coursework. She found her grandfather sitting at the kitchen table. The notices were spread out in front of him, the calculator beside them. The numbers didn't work. No matter how many times he ran them, they didn't work. Grandpa? He looked up. And for the first time in her entire life, Naomi saw something she had never seen before. His eyes were wet. Not crying. Not exactly. But wet in the way that happens when a man who has held everything together for everyone else finally reaches the place where holding isn't enough anymore. I promised your mama, he said quietly, that I would take care of you. I promised Pop I would take care of this shop. He paused, swallowed. And I can't do both. Naomi sat down across from him. She reached across the table and took his hand, his big, rough, calloused hand, in both of hers. We're not done yet. He didn't answer, but he didn't let go of her hands either. That week, 2 more businesses on the block gave in. The barber shop that had been there for 20 years. The laundromat on the corner where Dorothy used to wash their sheets before they could afford a machine. Both signed Dawson Holdings buyout papers. Both were gone within days. The windows were boarded up by Friday. The block was emptying. It was starting to look like a mouth losing its teeth. Then the second reporter came. But this one didn't come to tell Ben's story. She came to tell a different version of it. The segment ran on the evening news with the headline, Stubborn Shop Owner Refuses Development Deal, Holding Up Neighborhood Progress. The narrative flipped overnight. The comments came fast. Just take the money, old man. He's holding the whole block hostage. Stop playing the victim. 50,000 is more than fair. Some people would rather lose everything than admit they're wrong. Naomi read them at the kitchen table on her laptop. She made it through about 30 before she slammed the screen shut so hard the hinge cracked. They don't know you. They don't know a single thing about you. Ben was standing at the counter, drying a coffee cup he'd washed 3 times already. They don't have to, baby. People talk about what they don't understand. Always have. Always will. She looked at him. Fierce. Angry. Protective in a way that made her look exactly like her mother. It's not fair. No, Ben said. It's not. That night after Naomi had gone to bed, Ben sat in the dark garage one more time. No lights on. Just the faint glow of the street lamp coming through the window, falling across Willie's photo on the wall. The phone rang. Dale. I heard what they're doing. The red tag, the auction, all of it. Word travels fast. Damn right it does. Now you listen to me, Ben. Don't you dare give up. You hear me? Don't you dare. Ben leaned back in the chair, looked up at Willie's face in the half-dark. That grin, that wrench held high. A man who built something out of nothing and never once apologized for it. I'm not giving up, Dale. His voice was quiet, tired, honest. I'm just running out of road. Dale was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, lower. The voice of a man making a decision. Then we'll build you some more. He hung up and started dialing. Howard Dawson's office sat on the top floor of a building made almost entirely of glass. From his desk he could see the river, the bridge, the skyline, and 3 of the 14 neighborhoods his company had acquired in the past 5 years. He never looked at them. They were numbers to him. Parcels. Line items on a spreadsheet that only went in one direction. There was one personal item in the entire office. A framed photograph of a girl at age 12, sitting on a bicycle with her helmet crooked, laughing at whoever was behind the camera. That was Ellie, before everything went wrong. His assistant brought in the day's mail. Howard sorted through it without interest until his hand stopped on an envelope with no return address. Handwritten. He recognized the handwriting before he opened it. He sat very still for a moment. Then he opened it. The letter was short. It didn't ask for money. It didn't ask for forgiveness. It didn't ask for anything at all. It told a story. A rainstorm. A garage on a dark street. An old man who fixed 6 motorcycles in one night and never asked for a dime. A wool blanket draped over her shoulders without a word. A packet of noodles, the last food in the shop. A cup of coffee, the last he could make. And a sentence at 4 a.m. that she hadn't been able to stop thinking about. Call your father. She wrote, A stranger said what I needed to hear, Dad. He had nothing, literally nothing, and he gave me everything. His blanket, his last food, his whole night. He didn't even ask my name. And then, I don't know if I'm ready to come home, but I'm ready to talk. Howard read the letter twice. He removed his glasses, set them on the desk, leaned back and looked at the photo of the 12-year-old girl on the bicycle. He sat there for a long time. Then he picked up the phone. Get me everything on a property called Foster's Fix-It, 412 Elm Street. At the same time, 300 miles south, Dale Cooper was making calls of his own. Not regional calls this time, national ones. Every Iron Roads chapter president in the directory. Every Veterans Network contact he'd built over 30 years of service and 10 years of riding. This wasn't a fundraiser. This wasn't a petition. This was a mobilization. Catherine Brooks had filed a formal inquiry with the State Attorney General's office the day before. Her documentation was thorough and devastating. The same displacement pattern by Dawson Holdings repeated across 3 counties and 14 communities. Rezone, inflate, displace, acquire. The evidence wasn't just compelling, it was undeniable. We can't stop the auction, Catherine told Dale, but we can make sure the entire country is watching when it happens. Tommy Garrett coordinated the logistics the way he'd been trained to, like a military operation, riding routes from 6 states. Departure times staggered to ensure arrival within the same 30-minute window. Staging areas, parking, communication channels. One by one, the confirmations came in. Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Tennessee. Chapter presidents, veteran writers, people who had never met Benjamin Foster but had seen the video of his hands and heard the story of his night and decided that some things were worth driving through the dark for. Estimated count? Somewhere between 280 and 320 riders. They were coming. Every one of them. Back in his glass office, Howard Dawson had the Foster's Fix-It file open on his desk. Property records, tax history, rezoning request. His eyes moved down the page until they stopped on a line near the bottom. The company letterhead on the rezoning petition was his own. He picked up the phone and called Victor Crane. The Foster property, Block 14, Elm Street, that's yours? Standard acquisition, one of the last holdouts on the block. That old man, the mechanic. Howard's voice was steady but thin, like a wire being stretched. He took care of my daughter. He gave her his blanket, his last meal. He fixed 6 motorcycles through the night and didn't ask for a cent. And then he told her to call me. Silence. My daughter hadn't spoken to me in 3 years, Victor. 3 years. And a stranger in a garage at 4 in the morning did what I couldn't do. A long pause. Cancel the Foster acquisition. Sir, we've invested significant. Cancel it now. Auction day. Ben woke at 5 in the morning. The house was dark, the street was quiet. He lay in bed for a minute, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of a day that was about to take everything. He got up, shaved slowly, put on the white button-down shirt he kept in the back of the closet, the one he'd worn to Dorothy's funeral, pressed his pants, polished his shoes. If he was going to lose, he was going to lose looking like a man his father would recognize. He packed a cardboard box, Willie's photo, the toolbox, a stack of Naomi's drawings from when she was small, crayon sketches of the garage, of a man under a car, of a sign that said Grandpa's shop, Dorothy's curtains from the front window. Naomi appeared in the hallway. She was wearing the Foster's Fix-It t-shirt she'd had printed for the TV interview. Her eyes were red, but her jaw was set. You don't have to come, baby. I'm coming. They drove to the garage in silence. Neither of them turned on the radio. There was nothing anyone could say that would help. Ben unlocked the door one last time, stood inside, ran his hand along the workbench. 43 years of scratches and oil stains, the topography of a life spent fixing other people's problems. He could feel every nick under his palm. Every one of them was a story. Every one of them mattered. He picked up the box. Then he heard it. A rumble. Low. Distant. Like thunder that hadn't made up its mind yet, but it wasn't thunder. It was getting louder, and it wasn't stopping. Ben stepped outside. Naomi was right behind him. The road was filling. Motorcycles. Not 1 or 2, not a dozen. They came in a wave. 10, then 20, then 50, then more than either of them could count. Iron roads, patches from 6 states. Men and women in leather and denim. Gray-haired veterans who'd ridden through the night. Younger riders who'd taken the day off work without telling their bosses why. They lined both sides of the street in formation, engines idling, a wall of sound that rattled the windows of the garage and shook the ground beneath Ben's feet. 300 motorcycles, 300 riders, and at the front of the line, one Harley-Davidson with a manifold gasket that had been cracked 5 days ago and rebuilt by hand at 2 in the morning by a man who didn't charge a dime. Dale Cooper killed his engine, stepped off the bike, removed his helmet, walked straight to Ben. You fixed 6, old man. We brought 300. Behind the bikers, a news van with its satellite dish already raised. Catherine Brooks holding a leather folder full of legal documents. Neighbors who hadn't sold, standing on their porches with their arms crossed, watching, waiting. Naomi grabbed Ben's arm. Tears were streaming down her face, but she was laughing, both at the same time, the way people do when something impossible happens and the body doesn't know which emotion to pick. Ben looked at the sea of chrome and leather and American flags. His hands were trembling. The box was still in his arms. I didn't ask for this. Dale put a hand on his shoulder. You didn't have to. That's the whole damn point. The crowd parted. A black town car rolled through the corridor of motorcycles, slow and deliberate, like it understood that it was entering someone else's territory. It stopped in front of the garage. Howard Dawson stepped out. Gray suit, no tie. He carried a leather folder in one hand. In his breast pocket, folded carefully, was a letter written in his daughter's handwriting. 300 bikers stared at the man whose company had nearly destroyed the garage they'd come to protect. Howard felt every one of those eyes. He didn't flinch. He walked straight to Ben, stopped 3 feet in front of him. Mr. Foster, my name is Howard Dawson. My company is the reason you're standing here today with a box in your hands. Ben set the box down on the ground, said nothing, waited. My daughter wrote me a letter. She told me what you did for her. The blanket, the food, the coffee at 4 a.m. Howard paused. His voice was steady, but only barely. You told her to call me. She hadn't spoken to me in 3 years. 3 years, Mr. Foster. And a stranger in a garage in the middle of the night with $11 to his name. That stranger did what I couldn't do. He opened the folder. Inside, a tax clearance certificate, paid in full. A formal withdrawal of the fire code violation complaint. And a deed protection guarantee ensuring that the property at 412 Elm Street could not be rezoned, reassessed, or auctioned for 25 years. Howard looked at Ben, looked at the crowd, looked at the sign that said Foster's Fix It. Real wealth is knowing someone cared when they didn't have to. Ben took the folder. His hands, 64 years old, calloused, worn smooth in the places that mattered most, were shaking. He didn't speak for a long time. The crowd was silent. 300 people, not a sound. Then, quiet and steady. Your daughter's a good woman, Mr. Dawson. You should be proud of her. Howard's composure broke. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a crack, a tightening of the jaw, a blink that lasted too long, a single nod that carried the weight of 3 lost years. That was all, but it was everything. A black SUV pulled into the far end of the lot. Victor Crane. He stepped out expecting to finalize an auction, and instead found 300 motorcycles, 4 news cameras, and his boss standing next to the man he'd spent weeks trying to remove. Howard turned to him. Calm, cold, the kind of calm that comes after a decision has already been made. Victor, I'm restructuring the acquisition division. Your methods are under review. You're reassigned. Effective immediately. Sir, I was following standard company protocol. People aren't parcels. Catherine Brooks stepped forward and addressed the cameras directly. She announced that a formal review request had been filed with the State Attorney General's office, documenting a pattern of predatory rezoning and displacement by Dawson Holdings across 3 counties and 14 communities. Victor stood still. Then he walked to his car. The crowd watched him go. Nobody cheered. Nobody jeered. Nobody said a word. Because that wasn't who these people were. And that wasn't how Benjamin Foster had raised his granddaughter. Naomi looked up at her grandfather. "What do you think Great-Grandpa Willie would say right now?" Ben glanced down at the box on the ground. Willie's photo was on top, face up, that wide grin catching the morning light. He almost smiled. He'd say, "Get back to work. Those bikes ain't gonna fix themselves." 300 people laughed, and for the first time in weeks, Benjamin Foster laughed with them. A second car pulled into the lot, smaller than the town car, dusty. The kind of car you drive when you don't have much and don't pretend to. Ellie stepped out. She hadn't seen her father in 3 years. She was wearing jeans, a borrowed jacket, and the look of someone who had driven 100 miles trying to decide whether to turn around at every exit. Howard turned. Father and daughter stood 20 feet apart. 300 people went quiet. Even the engines had stopped. Ellie took one step, then another. Then she was walking, and Howard opened his arms, and she fell into them like someone letting go of something she'd been carrying far too long. No one spoke. No one needed to. The crowd looked away, not from discomfort, but from respect. Some moments don't belong to an audience. Ben watched from the garage doorway. Naomi was beside him, her hand in his. "You did that, Grandpa?" Ben shook his head. "I just fixed some bikes, baby girl." That afternoon, the parking lot of Foster's Fix-It turned into something none of them had planned. Someone brought a grill. Someone else brought coolers. Within an hour, 300 bikers, a handful of neighbors, and 2 Dawsons were crowded into the lot, eating burgers and ribs and potato salad off paper plates, while music played from a Bluetooth speaker balanced on a toolbox. Tommy Garrett was inside the garage, showing Naomi how to adjust a carburetor. She picked it up in 2 minutes flat. Tommy looked over at Ben and grinned. "She's got your hands, Mr. Foster." Ben watched her work. "She's got better ones." Dale and Howard sat in folding chairs near the bay door, paper plates on their knees. 2 men who had nothing in common except a debt to the same person. "Your daughter rode 100 miles on a borrowed bike to get here," Dale said. Howard looked at Ellie across the lot. She was laughing at something one of the riders said. He hadn't seen her laugh in years. "She gets that stubbornness from me." Dale shook his head. "That ain't stubbornness, that's guts." By evening, everyone was gone. The lot was empty. The paper plates were in the trash. The grill was cold. Fireflies drifted across the yard in the warm dark. Ben stood alone in the garage. He lifted Willie's photo out of the cardboard box and hung it back on the wall, straightened it with both hands. Then he took Naomi's hand-painted sign and hung it back on the door. He stood there for a moment. Then he pulled a marker from his pocket and wrote one word at the bottom in his own handwriting. Still. Foster's Fix-It. Honest work, fair price. Since 1983. Still. He locked the door, walked upstairs, and for the first time in months, he slept the whole night through. 6 months later, Foster's Fix-It was still standing. But it wasn't the same shop anymore. It was bigger than one man now. Benjamin Foster started a free mechanic training program for young people in the neighborhood. Kids who reminded him of himself at their age. Hands that needed something to hold. A purpose that needed somewhere to land. The program was funded by a grant from the Dawson Foundation. Howard signed the check himself. Naomi Foster received a full academic scholarship to Virginia State University. She's studying business. She told her grandfather she plans to open a second location when she graduates. He told her to make sure the sign looks right. Howard Dawson restructured his company's acquisition division from the ground up. Every property deal now requires a community impact review before a single paper is signed. He drives to Foster's Fix-It once a month. They drink coffee and talk about engines. Ellie Dawson moved back to the area. She runs a veterans transition shelter and rides with the Iron Roads every spring. Dale Cooper made the annual ride to Ben's shop an official Iron Roads tradition. Every year, more bikes show up than the year before. Victor Crane transferred to a different division without a word. 6 months later, an anonymous donation arrived at the training program. The amount was generous. The name on the check was blank.
After this story, one thing stuck with me. The people who give the most are usually the ones who have the least, not because they are foolish, because they know what it feels like to have nothing. They know what it means to be hungry, to be cold, to be invisible, and when they see someone else going through it, they can't walk past. They just can't. And here's the beautiful thing. What you put into the world doesn't disappear. It travels, it finds people you would never met. It opens door you didn't know existed. You might never see it come back, but it's come back. Always, maybe not today, maybe not the way you repeat it, but it comes back. So, if you have something to give it. Even if it's your last, even if nobody's watching, even if you think it's too small to matter, it's not. A blanket matters, a meal matters, and a kind word at 4 in the morning matters. Because sometimes the smallest thing you give becomes the biggest thing someone's ever received. Like, share, and subscribe. Real stories, real justice every week. And remember, you don't have to have much to give much. Kindness doesn't cost a thing, and it pays back more than money ever could.